I'm going to introduce, we have two colleagues from Seton Hall University. We have John Cardoza, who's the Assistant Director of Financial Aid for incoming undergraduate students. John has been to the prep. John has been a part of this presentation before. And as you know, we work, pretty closely with Seton Hall University and, send students there every year. So they have a very good knowledge of our students and our profile and, what we're trying to do. And also we have, Alyssa McLeod, who's the Senior Vice President of Enrollment Management at Seton Hall University. I have known Alyssa now for, I think we're going over a decade now, and she's done this, annually for us for probably 6 or 7 years at this point, and just does a terrific job, just a wealth of knowledge. And so at this point, I'm going to hand it over to John and Alyssa. And again, I thank you all for coming, and I will send out a recording this after. All right, John, Alyssa, it's all yours.
Thank you.
Okay, so let me walk you through some of the basics of financial aid first. And I want to start with a very basic question, which is, what is financial aid? And I'm sure a lot of you have ideas coming in your head right now. And those things include scholarships and grants. Those are the parts of financial aid we actually like the most. But what financial aid is actually any form of monetary assistance that helps you pay for college. It's not just the things we like. It's also the things we don't like as much. The grants, the loans, the work study, things that we have to pay back. It would be great if it was just scholarships and grants that you didn't need to pay back. But in actuality, that's not what financial aid is. What you normally think of when you think of financial aid, you're thinking of gift aid. That's scholarships and grants. But all of financial aid is technically considered any form of monetary assistance that could help you pay for college. And it's important that you understand that, because you'll hear people talking about financial aid a lot. And you need to know that when they're talking about financial aid, they mean all of these things, not just the good stuff that we like. So keep that in mind, especially because sometimes you'll get flyers or solicitations from people who say, sign up with our counselor and we'll fill out your financial aid for you, and we promise we'll get you financial aid. And they can actually promise, because at a minimum, everybody who files for financial aid is guaranteed at least a low interest student loan. So they're sort of using the word financial aid to cover themselves legally. So I want to make sure you understand that. So how does one actually go about applying for financial aid? So financial aid applications are a universal form used by every school in the country, no matter where you want to go. It's called the Fafsa, the Free Application for Federal Student Aid. That's actually a federal government form. It's free. You should never have to pay to fill this out. If you ever go to a website where they're asking you to pay money to fill it out, you're probably on the wrong website. Okay, so you want to apply online at fafsa.gov. It's very good to do this online. It's got lots of built-in edit checks and skip logic. And they also have an app which you can download and fill this out on your phone. You will be given what's called an Fsa Id number. That's kind of like a number that you would use to sign your documents at the end. Now you're going to get one of these for the student and the parent. And it's very important that you keep track of this, because you're going to need this to log back in and to update and access your information later on. And you can create this ID number at the very start of the process of filing your financial aid application, your FAFSA. You do that at the very beginning for the student, but at the end you can do it for the parent. And you only need one set of login credentials for the parents. You don't need two. And if you don't create this FAFSA ID number at the end of your FAFSA, and you don't enter it at the very end, you will be considered incomplete. They will think of it as you have not signed your document. So it's very important that at the end of your document, you enter this ID number. You can start the document and save it and go back to it in several days. You don't have to finish it all in one shot if you don't want to. It should generally take about 45 to 60 minutes to complete this. And just so you know, you do have to file the FAFSA every year. It's not just a form you fill out once, you have to fill it out every year the student is in college. It should get easier as time moves forward because they will have some of your information and then it will roll over. There's also a very important process called the IRS data retrieval tool, which I believe we'll talk about a little later, but I do want to encourage you to use that. It does help you fill out this form by retrieving information directly from the IRS, and that will be of a great help to you. I want to talk a little bit right now about who can apply, but I'm actually going to turn this over to John, and he's going to talk about who can apply and tell you a little bit more about this process. John?
Yes, thank you, Alyssa. So when it comes to who can apply, first of all, very important question. Only U.S. citizens and permanent residents can file the FAFSA. Undocumented students are ineligible to file. If a student is a U.S. citizen, but the parents are not, the FAFSA will ask for parental social security numbers. The student can then enter all zeros. New Jersey does allow for undocumented students to receive state aid. They must have attended a New Jersey school for 3 years and graduated from that high school. They go to HESA.org to apply to what's called the New Jersey Alternative Financial Aid Application. Of course, yes, and the FAFSA, of course, opened for applications on October 1st, so it's now the 21st. Not much time has passed since then. You're applying in your senior year of high school. You're going to use the term as prior year's tax information. So this upcoming academic year is going to be the 2021-2022 academic year, and the FAFSA is going to ask for a 2019 tax information. We recommend that you file as soon as possible. So, if you haven't already, now would be a good time to do so. Schools may have certain deadlines that they want you to meet as far as filing the FAFSA goes. Seton Hall in particular has a November 1st priority deadline, which we'd like you to hit, so that way we can provide you all the information when it comes to your financial aid as soon as possible. Some things that you'll need to have on hand, your social security card, if you don't know social security number offhand, that's for both parents and students. Copies of the 2019 tax return for both parents and students if the student worked in 2019, and that's if you don't intend to use the IRS data retrieval tool, which we will talk about shortly. And then you also need to have the Seton Hall school code, which is 002632. And so that way, when you enter that code, that assures us that it'll reach Seton Hall. So what you enter on the FAFSA, initially some basic biographical information, address, citizenship, marital status, then some financial information. So that's why you would need your tax returns, some asset info that'll be self-reported, whether or not you use the data retrieval tool, some information about number of people attending college in the household. Selective service is important for males aged 18. And even if you haven't turned 18, if you're about to turn 18 and it's time for you to file the FAFSA, still go ahead and file. Just know that you will need to, once you've registered for selective service, you will need to log back onto the FAFSA and update the FAFSA with that information. If not, be prepared for different financial aid offices to reach out to you to ask that they receive that information. And this information, of course, in general, you're entering it for both students and parents. If parents are divorced, this is a question that comes up quite often. If parents are divorced, the FAFSA is asking for parental tax information. If parents are divorced, the students will enter the name of the parent who they live with 51% of the time. All right. And if parents are remarried, you will need to include a step parent, and that is a federal regulation that Seton Hall has no control over, unfortunately. And I think we're good to move on there. Okay, so the data retrieval tool, which we've mentioned a few times, this is a tool that's built into the FAFSA, which allows you to log into the IRS and have the IRS populate information from your tax returns onto the FAFSA. And so this is secure. The information won't be visible. And what that does is it ensures accuracy, and the chances that we will need to follow up for any reason are significantly reduced, as well as it improves the processing time. So in order to ensure that the data retrieval tool works correctly. Just make sure that everything matches as far as when you're entering certain information such as addresses, that everything matches exactly as your tax returns, such we have the examples there on the slide, street versus street, parkway versus parkway. And I should also mention that parents who filed their taxes married filing separately will not be eligible to use the data retrieval tool. You'll have to have both 2019 tax returns in front of you and enter that information in manually. All right, some tips and tricks and FAQs for the FAFSA. When entering Social Security numbers and names, make sure that those appear exactly as they do on the Social Security card, so not much different from the data retrieval tool there in terms of ensuring accuracy. Do not leave questions blank. If a parent has no Social Security number or income, fill in all zeros. And I had a parent ask me just today if filling in N/A for not applicable would be okay. No, the answer is all zeros. Don't use commas or decimal points, always round to the nearest dollar. If you're entering income, use data from your tax returns, not your W-2s. Again, we're ensuring accuracy this way. Parents do not have to be U.S. citizens or eligible non-citizens to qualify. Only the students need be. And students that want to list 10 colleges or more on their FAFSA, you're applying to a lot of colleges. First off, I know Dr. McLeod has an opinion on that. But if you want to do so, you can list up to 10 schools on FAFSA initially, and then save and submit it. It'll reach those schools. Give it enough time to process. We say 5 to 7 days just to be safe. And then you can, of course, reach out to those schools, ensure that they've received the FAFSA. Then you can log back onto your FAFSA, update your schools, save and submit, give it a little bit of time to process, and it should arrive at the new schools. So you can apply to as many schools as you like in that sense. And now I'm going to hand it over back to Dr. McLeod.
Thank you, John. So the process that John just discussed is the FAFSA form. That's the federal government financial aid process. And that, again, is a universal form that every school in the country will use. In addition to that, there's another form called the CSS profile, which is not used as widely. It generally is used by some private schools. And you should not worry about this form or complete this form unless you know for certain that the school you're applying to is requiring it, okay? This is a form that is hosted by the College Board, and you can access it at the website I have here. It requires a lot more detailed information than the FAFSA itself. It's going to ask you about your debt, your home equity. It's going to ask you about multiple years of tax returns, perhaps. And generally, it's used by a school to determine the amount of financial aid that they want to give you from their own resources. Okay? Whereas the FAFSA will definitely dictate what federal and state aid you're eligible for, as well as work study and loans. For schools that don't require the CSS profile, it will also be used for institutional aid. But if the school asks for a CSS profile, it's because they want to use it specifically for their institutional aid. It doesn't have an impact on government aid. Again, you still have to file the FAFSA. There is a fee to file the CSS profile. It's $25, and then you need to pay, in addition to that, $16 per school. It should take between 45 minutes and 2 hours, depending on how complex the form is. Schools can tailor this, so there might be different questions depending on what school you're applying to. Similar to the FAFSA, you can start applying as early as October 1st, but I recommend that you reach out to the schools that require the CSS profile and ask when their deadline is, and that you try to submit it at least 2 weeks before the school's deadline for your decision program, whether that's early decision or early action. It's okay on this form to estimate if you need to, if you haven't done. Sometimes it will ask for current information from the tax year that we have yet to process because it hasn't happened yet. But if they do ask that, it's okay to estimate. There will be different sections for parents and students, and they color code that. Parent info in green and students info in white. And you want to make sure when you do this that similarly, you don't leave fields blank, you put zeros. And just a reminder that you have to still file the FAFSA in addition to this form, especially if you want any government loans or other federal or state financial aid, and even work study. You need help with the CSS profile, I have some phone numbers here and contact information for the College Board. So let me talk about what happens after you file your FAFSA. So after you file your financial aid application with the federal government, generally takes a few days for the government to process your FAFSA. And once it's processed, you're going to receive something called a SAR, a Student Aid Report. Your SAR is actually emailed. If you're not on mute, can you mute your computer? Because I think that we're hearing some background noise. Thank you so much. The SAR.
Hey guys, again, if you could please mute yourselves, please.
Okay, so your SAR, your Student Aid Report, is emailed to you if you provided an email address when you applied for your FAFSA. You can also log back into the FAFSA with your ID number and look at that information as well. But the SAR is very important. You need to review it carefully. It's going to tell you if there are any errors, if there are any problems with your financial aid, if you need to go back and fix anything. The information is also going to be sent to any state agencies. So,
You know what, let me say, Alyssa and Ben, I don't think I was made a co-host. You might have the option to mute all participants by your mute
Yeah,
button.
give me 1 second, John. I'm looking at it right now.
okay. Your SAR, your Student Aid Report, is very, very important. You should read it and carefully pay attention to it. The results of your FAFSA will also be sent to your state financial aid agency. So not only will you get the results, but so will the state of New Jersey or New York or wherever you live. And they'll use that to determine whether or not you qualify for any aid from the state government. It'll also be sent to any school you listed on your FAFSA, as John said, up to 10 of them, but also could be sent to additional schools later. I want to let you know that it's very important when you're filing your FAFSA, at the very end, if you're a New Jersey resident, there's going to be a few questions from an organization called HESA. HESA is the Higher Educational Student Assistance Authority. That's the New Jersey state agency that manages our financial aid. It's very important you answer those questions at the end of the FAFSA if they're going to evaluate you for any state aid. And please pay attention to any notices or emails you get from HESA. I know you get a lot of messages, you don't know what's real and what's fake. So I just want you to know if you see messages from them, you should pay attention to them. The most important piece of information that will be a result of your FAFSA and is provided to you on your Student Aid Report and when you log back in after your FAFSA is processed is a number. And that number is called your EFC, your expected or estimated family contribution. Now, the EFC is the amount of money that the government is estimating a family can contribute to their college, to their child's college education. I like to say it's what the government thinks you can pay for college. I know that many families, my mother included years ago, wanted to know what the government was thinking, because often the amount that the government expects or estimates your family can contribute is higher than you can actually afford. Please know that the colleges and universities have this number. So the amount of your EFC is a result of the FAFSA, and it is a number that drives your financial aid eligibility. And it is important for you to understand and know what that number is. If you want to know what your EFC is before you file the FAFSA, you can go to finaid.org, or you can search for FAFSA forecaster, that's with the number 4, on the fafsa.gov website, and that will give you a forecast. But at this point, if your son or daughters are and if any of your children are high school seniors, you should really be filing the actual FAFSA at this point, as opposed to just doing a forecast. But if you're juniors, you can work on the forecast at this point. Okay, I want you to understand how important the EFC is. So it's really a key driver that determines your eligibility for all need-based aid. That would be from the federal government, from the state, as well as from the institution you're applying to. And the formula for financial aid is a very common formula in financial aid. In fact, if you were a brand new financial aid counselor, this would be like financial aid 101 we would teach you. Okay, and this basic formula is cost of attendance, which I'm going to talk about in a few minutes because I want to make sure you understand what that means, minus EFC, which is the amount of money the government thinks you can pay, and it's the estimated or expected family contribution, which is a result of your FAFSA. That equals need. So whether or not you have financial need is a result of this formula. Cost of attendance minus what the FAFSA estimates you can pay, that equals your need. Now, your EFC will always be the same, regardless of where you go to college, because it's all a result of this universal FAFSA form that you file through the federal government. However, your financial need is not the same at each school because it's driven by the cost of attendance. So I have some examples for you. I have here school A, school B, and school C. So if you see, the first line is the cost of attendance. School A is 30,000, school B is 40, school C is 50,000. In all cases, your EFC is the same, $15,000, but your need is different. Your need is different at each school because it's driven by that formula with the cost of attendance as the first consideration. Now, please know that need-based aid cannot exceed the amount of need. So that number in orange cannot be exceeded with need-based aid. It may be exceeded with scholarship aid. That's up to the school's policies. Please also know that the number in orange, the need, the amount you need, doesn't mean the school is going to meet your full need. Okay, that's important to know. Just because you need it doesn't mean the school is going to provide it. There are some schools that meet full need, and if they do, this is usually the formula they will use. They might have some nuances because they might require the profile. So their number might be a little different than the EFC because they're factoring in their own version of the EFC that they've derived from additional information in the profile. So I mentioned to you that I wanted to tell you what cost of attendance meant, as that's a key driver of that formula. And cost of attendance is also a basic financial aid term that if you were a brand new financial aid counselor, it would be sort of your 101 training. Basically what the cost of attendance is your direct costs and your indirect costs combined. So your direct costs are the things that you're not going to get a bill for. Both of those things together are what make up the cost of attendance. So it's very important for you to understand that bigger picture. I'm going to turn the floor over to John now, who's going to talk to you and explain the different types of aid. And John, you might be muted because I know Ben muted everyone, so make sure you're unmuted.
No, yes, no worries. Appreciate it, Dr. McLeod. Okay, so the types of aid, we did just briefly. I'll say initially we have gift aid, of course, which Dr. McLeod touched on earlier. So grants and scholarships, need-based aid, which is based on either merit or talent. And so these are, again, these are funds that you're not paying back. So that's the best type of aid, of course. That's what everyone's looking for. Next is self-help aid, which are loans, work study. So loans, of course, you're paying back. Work study, we're going to delve into that just in a minute. Thank you, Dr. McLeod. Okay, so need-based grants, your EFC only dictates your eligibility for need-based aid. So a few different sources of need-based aid. First, initially, you're submitting the FAFSA. Again, that's the free application for federal student aid. So this determines whether or not you received one of two federal grants. So the first grant is the Pell Grant. And so that's reserved for the neediest students, usually with an EFC of about 5,500 or less. And so while there's no hard or fast rule for how large a family or how much of what income necessarily determines EFC, we'll just say Dr. McLeod, knows from experience that, let's say, a family of four with what would you say, an income of 40,000, 50,000?
Yeah, generally a family of four with $40,000
Yeah.
qualifies for Pell. So it's really reserved for the students that are very needy.
Right. And so that amount, currently we say we have this up on the slide as 6,000. Currently, the maximum Pell grant for a student is 6,345. So not much different there. And that's for the year. So split in half between 2 semesters. The next grant is the Seog grant. That's again reserved for the neediest students who also have, let's say, a considerable gap to fill in their financial aid overall, and they're awarded $2,400 per year in that Seog grant.
Yeah, and generally to be eligible for Seog, you also have to be Pell eligible.
Correct. And so the state government, New Jersey in particular, is very generous when compared to other states in both the amounts of students they award financial aid and the amounts of the funds that they offer each student. So the maximum that a student could receive at a New Jersey, and this is a private institution, it depends on whether a student is going to a private, public, 4-year, 2-year institution, but the maximum that you could receive at Seton Hall, being a 4-year private institution, would be just over $12,900 per year currently. And so HESA also sends you an equivalent to the SAR, which is, of course, the student aid report from the FAFSA. They send you a student eligibility notice, which you will need to make sure you take a look at. Additionally, they'll email you when they receive the FAFSA, they'll email you and they'll let you know if they require any additional information. Now would be a good time to mention that HESA has a particularly colorful logo, and the fact that they're asking for personal information often means that ends up, somehow ending up in students' junk folders or being deleted without getting a thorough read through. So I would just caution you, make sure if HESA sends anything, you take a look. The state could request additional documentation at any time, and they have very strict deadlines. All right, so next is universities. Universities will look at the FAFSA to determine your need-based aid. Each university has their own method. There's another term, institutional methodology, which we'll touch on shortly here. And I think we're good to move on. Okay, scholarships and non-need-based gift aid. So scholarships, again, we spoke about scholarships determined by merit, and that could be GPA, test scores, if applicable. Of course, now a lot of schools are going to test optional, Seton Hall included. All right, but and I know actually Mr. Laster wanted me to touch upon this. I will put it in the chat. Seton Hall in particular has a number of scholarships, what we call special scholarships, that incoming freshmen can apply to, some of which they are evaluated for upon receipt of their common application, others of which have a January 15th deadline. So that is important to note, because those scholarships are limited, they go and they're competitive. All right, so.
But let me also add, John, that we're also very generous with our aid. We give over $100 million a year, and every student who applies to Seton Hall is automatically considered for a scholarship at the point of admission. So many scholarships are given without an application, but as John mentioned, there are some special ones that there are applications for, and that's what he's going to drop in the chat for you later.
Yeah, no, and I've dropped it now. Just once that was perfect, gave me the opportunity to drop that for the first time. I'm going to be putting that and a few more links in as we go along and answer questions. So I'll jump back to the slide, and we're looking at a few different scholarship aggregator websites. I'm sure many of you familiarize yourself with some of those already. And of course, if you need help looking at more, you could always reach out. I will be putting information on how to reach out to us in the chat later as well. And of course, always a good idea to check with any local organizations. We have Knights of Columbus, Lions Club, Rotary, etc., churches, and parents' employers are always a good source. You might not know that your employer offers scholarships. All right. So self-help aid, we spoke about work study before. Work study could refer to both student just working on campus to receive a regular biweekly paycheck, as well as a specific federal program, which then they do the same thing, nothing really different, except that this federal work study program, again, eligibility determined by the FAFSA, when a student enters their earnings, their income 2 years later on their, as they're submitting the FAFSA, that income will not be counted or will not discount them, will not negatively impact their financial aid. It'll be looked more as a scholarship as opposed to income. So work study jobs, just in general, Seton Hall in particular, there's a cap on hours. So students can work a maximum of 20 hours per week. They receive a regular biweekly paycheck. You can set up direct deposit if you like. This is what they earn does not go towards their bill. That's separate. So it's coming to them directly. And of course, the 20-hour week cap means everyone knows their supervisors are usually administrators or professors, and everyone knows that a student's first priority is to be in class and studying. All right, so now we get into the loans, and this is where we get a little bit into the weeds, but as Dr. McLeod mentioned, everyone is guaranteed to receive offers for federal student loans upon submission of the FAFSA. So initially you have the direct student loan. That's what the students receive, formerly referred to as the FAFSA, as the Stafford Loan, a term parents might be more familiar with. This is offered to the student, so it's in their name. Repayment is not mandatory until 6 months after graduating or no longer attending full-time. So we have dropping below half-time, that would be 6 credits, half-time. There's a 10-year repayment period. The principal is deferred until graduation, and the loan comes in 2 forms. It comes in the form of subsidized loan, in which the interest is deferred until repayment begins. So that basically means the subsidized loan will not be accruing any interest while the student is in school full-time. The unsubsidized loan, the interest accrues from disbursement. All right, so we have here the next point here is subsidized or unsubsidized. The amount is determined by remaining need, except that $2,000 is always unsubsidized. So the amount will be split. We have numbers down at the bottom that you receive a total offer of $5,500 for the year as a freshman, $2,000 of which is unsubsidized, $3,500 subsidized, and then so on and so forth. Sophomore, $6,500, so $4,500 is subsidized, $2,000 unsubsidized, and junior and senior year, $5,500 subsidized, $2,000 unsubsidized. Currently,
let me just clarify something there, John. So, of course, the difference between subsidized and unsubsidized is very different. Subsidized means that your interest and your principal are deferred, whereas unsubsidized, just the principal is deferred. If you had a choice, you would always want a subsidized loan so that the interest is deferred. But not everybody gets a subsidized. Everybody gets $2,000 of unsub. But whether or not your loan is subsidized or unsubsidized, the amount, the difference, is depending on a remaining need calculation. So earlier I explained cost of education minus EFC equals need. After that, we start minusing all the free money, the gift aid you got. If you still have need left at the end, your loan will be subsidized. If you don't, your loan will be unsubsidized. So you don't get to pick. $2,000 is always unsub, and the remainder of the amounts here at the bottom may or may not be subsidized or unsubsidized, depending on the remaining need. Again, that can vary by school because it's driven by the cost of attendance and the various awards. So I just wanted to make sure you all understood that. Sorry, John.
No, correct. I should have slowed down on that part. So the interest rate currently for these loans for this academic year is 2.75%. And I just want to stress that that's actually a record low interest rate. We're all aware that the Fed has interest rates rather low right now. And so that's, that had a hand in this. Normally, you see those interest rates around 4%, and that would typically be just under perhaps the lowest of the private interest rates that we see offered when it comes to private student loans. Also, there's a 1% origination fee. That means that if you accept the full $5,500 in the loan, whether it be all unsubsidized or split between subsidized and unsubsidized, basically $70 between the 2 semesters goes straight to the federal government, does not hit a student's account. All right, so next is the Federal Parent Plus loan. So this loan is similar to the subsidized and unsubsidized loans, but this is a loan, federal loan, that parents take out in their name so long as a FAFSA is on file. So there's a credit check involved, and the federal government is the lender. You can borrow up to cost of attendance, okay, which we discussed earlier, all gift aid and student loans, if you're taking student loans. And then I should state that parents apply using their Fsa Id that they created to sign the FAFSA, if they're the parent that signed the FAFSA, and they apply at studentaid.gov, which you notice is the same website where you submit the FAFSA. If a parent is not listed on the FAFSA and would like to apply, we would just need a copy of the student's birth certificate with the parent named on the certificate. And I'll say repayment begins, of course, while the student is still in school. You do have the option, just as with the subsidized and unsubsidized, of asking to defer repayment until 6 months after the student has graduated. Currently, the interest rate on this Parent Plus loan, 5.3%. Again, that's a record low interest rate. In the past, it was closer to edging up to 8%. And there's a 4% origination fee. So again, larger than the origination fee for the subsidized and unsubsidized loans. If there's anything that makes it somewhat unappealing, that would be it. Let's say a parent is denied a Parent Plus loan. One of the benefits of simply applying for the loan, is that if a parent is denied, they do have the option of reapplying with the cosigner or applying for a smaller amount. But you could also let the Office of Financial Aid know, and that loan could be and then the student's unsubsidized loan, which is initially $2,000, regardless, at least $2,000, could be increased by an additional $4,000 to make that $6,000 for the year. Other options for parents to consider, exploring home equity loans or private loans. And we do have this site down here listed, elmselect.com. If you were to go there and type in Seton Hall undergraduate, you can see various lenders that we work with directly that are built into our system. You could compare them side by side. Typically, you'd see both a range posted of potential interest rates for both their variable and fixed options. You could know that some may offer cosigner release, where after a certain amount of on-time payments, the cosigner is no longer held liable. Most of them, though, will typically have almost immediate repayment, but you can just compare and reach out to them with any additional questions.
Thank you so much, John. So I want to talk to you about what happens now. So we went over how you apply and what happens after you apply and all of the different types of aid. But now what happens? So the FAFSA form is sent to the school, and all of that information is pulled together to create what's called a financial aid package or an award letter. And that's going to indicate a number of things. It's going to indicate the total cost of attendance. One thing I want you to keep in mind is that when the cost of attendance is listed on the financial aid package, you need to pay careful attention. Are they listing the tuition for the year we're currently in, or the year that your child is planning to enroll, which would be the following year? Sometimes schools will list the current year and not the upcoming year because they don't have that information yet. So it's important that you pay attention to that in the cost of attendance. But it's going to list the cost of attendance. It's going to list all of your aid, your scholarships, your grants, any loans, any work study. It's going to show you everything that you might qualify for. Now, schools will have a different approach to determining whether or not you qualify for aid directly from the institution, what we call institutional aid. And schools are going to use their own, what is called institutional methodology for that. And that means that they all consider using different factors. And, I can't tell you what every school is going to do. The best thing for you to do at the outset is ask schools about what scholarships they offer and do your homework in relation to scholarships and grants. And you can ask them, what type of different awards they give students. But ultimately, you won't know the kind of financial aid package or award letter you're going to get from a school until they actually send you the document or release the document on some kind of portal for you to view. And schools generally start releasing that in December through March. So somewhere between those months, you should start to expect to get a lot of feedback from schools. This is, again, if you've already filed your FAFSA and the school has that information on file. This is when you can actually see the bottom line, what we call the net cost. Okay, because up until this point, you really only know the sticker price of the school. What does it cost? What are the costs that are listed on the website? But this is where in totality, you'll see what is the cost, where I have here cost of attendance, minus all the gift aid. That's what's considered your net cost. So the total cost of all of your attendance, that would be tuition, fees, room and board, and indirect costs like books and transportation, all of that total cost, minus the free money, the gift aid that you like. That's what your net cost is. And it's important that you understand what your net cost is. And the financial aid package that you receive should very clearly indicate what your net cost is. When you get that, I want to encourage you to compare the bottom line. Okay, it's important that you compare net cost to net cost, because this is really going to show you what it costs. And the net cost is before we assume that you're taking out, any loans. This is to let you know what is my cost before I either pay money or take out loans. You don't have to take out loans, by the way. It's better that you, try to pay a balance and reduce the amount of loans that you need to borrow. But anyway, here's a few examples of 3 potential schools, school A, B, and C. The total cost for these schools is very different, ranging from $35,000 to $19,000 to $42,000. And then you see at each school, the student got a particular scholarship. Then at each school, you see that they didn't get any Pell Grant, because Pell Grant is the same. No matter where you go to college, if you get a Pell Grant, you get the same amount everywhere. This student, in this example, did not qualify for any Pell Grant. TAG, which is from the state of New Jersey, you'll see that the amount varies from school to school. And the reason for that is the way the state of New Jersey gives the TAG grants is the amount of money you get is not the same no matter where you go. It varies by the cost of attendance. So the higher the cost of attendance, the higher the TAG grant would be. And then maybe the school gave you need-based aid. So that's this next line. If you look, the bottom line is the net cost, taking that total cost and minusing all of the gift aid, the free money. And as you can see, the most expensive school on this spreadsheet, the $42,000 school, is actually the least expensive when it comes to net cost. Now, I'm not going to say that's always the case, but I will say that that often happens. So one of the things I want to focus on or make sure you understand is that you shouldn't rule out schools at the outset due to cost, because you don't really know the bottom line or that net cost until much later in the cycle. So I encourage you to apply to the institutions that are the best fit for the student, that have the academic programs that you're the most interested, or have other characteristics or qualities that are important to the student. And then you would do this comparison at the end when you have all the financial aid packages. And I actually recommend you make a spreadsheet like this. You take school A, B, C, and D, well, you put their names at the top, Seton Hall and whatever the other schools' names are, and you put the total cost, which you should be able to find on the package, and then you minus all of these things, or hopefully all of the schools already give you the net cost number, so you can just eliminate all the cells in white and just compare the net costs on a quick spreadsheet. I also want to let you know that almost every university has a cost calculator on their website, which should give you a quick estimate of what you can expect from that institution in terms of financial aid, so that you can get a quick roundabout number of what the net cost might be. It's not 100% accurate, it is an estimate, but it is a helpful tool as well. I also want to tell you that when you're going through this process, it's important to ask certain questions. You'll want to know how much do costs increase annually. In general, costs do increase every year, and that's pretty typical. Does your FAFSA have an impact on admissions? At some institutions it might, so you'll want to ask that question. How is financial aid impacted if I apply early decision? You might want to ask that as well. Some schools do change their financial aid methodology, their institutional methodology based on whether you applied early decision. Are you required to file the FAFSA if you get a scholarship? Some schools will require you to do that, so you do want to know that so you don't lose it. You want to make sure that all the scholarships and grants you get are renewable. Sometimes they're not. It is unfortunately the case that sometimes a school will give you a scholarship in the first year that does not get renewed in subsequent years. And even those that do get renewed generally have some criteria for renewal. So you want to make sure you understand that. And then you also want to ask the school if they have to, if the student has to fill out any special forms or meet any special deadlines in order to be considered for scholarships. So hopefully this was a useful overview of all of the financial aid process. I'm sure you still have questions, so I'm going to open it up now for John and I to answer questions. I know you've been probably posting some in the chat, but if any of you are so brave to unmute yourself and ask out loud, that would be great. Or you can post them in the chat and perhaps Ben or John can read them aloud for us.
Yeah, what we'll do is I think the chat function is a better idea. So what we'll do is maybe you guys can enter your questions into the chat and then Dr. McLeod and John can address them directly. Is that
Okay.
good, John?
Sure.
Yeah, that
Okay.
works for me. I already found one
Yeah, there
that
was
was a
another
little
one
early on in the
from,
presentation.
there was another one from, I believe before this, from, I believe the Kaminskis, I believe. So there was one that was a little further back, but outside of that, feel free to put your questions in the chat and we'll answer them for the next, 10 minutes and then we'll let them go.
Okay.
So I see a question in here that I'm going to ask out loud, John, and you can answer. If your child already had, if you already have a child in college, can the parent use the same Fsa Id?
Right. So the question, I believe the parent is asking if they have already signed a FAFSA for maybe their elder child, they have their own FSA ID to mark the parental signature of the FAFSA. The student will be creating their own FSA ID. Their sibling has one FSA ID. The younger sibling will create their own FSA ID to file the FAFSA, and then the parent can use the same FSA ID that they used with the older child at the end to sign the parental signature. All right.
Exactly. So the parent, if they already have an FSA ID, they can use the same number for all of their children, regardless of what year they are. But the student needs their own individual one. I see another question here that my son is a junior. Should we file the FAFSA now? No, you should not file the FAFSA until the student's senior year. And you should do that after October 1st because the FAFSA isn't available until then. So after October 1st of the son's senior year is when you should file the FAFSA, and as early as possible is always advisable.
And Alyssa, I'm just gonna jump in for a second. Hold on one second, sorry. I'm just gonna jump in. The reason why we invite both juniors and seniors to this event is,
That's great.
juniors will go through the process, they'll start to have contenders, they'll go into August. A large percentage, the overwhelming majority of our students apply, not early decision, but early action, somewhere. So a lot of those are gonna demand that forms are gonna come in by November 1st. So really, this is a pretty swift timeline now, not just for seniors, but also for juniors once we start to get in the spring. So I just wanted to mention that.
I also want to add, Ben, that I think it's wonderful that you include juniors because it's very important for people to start understanding and wrapping their mind around this early. It's always a shame at the beginning of the senior year when it's the first time a family has started to think about it. That's why looking at the FAFSA forecaster and looking at some cost calculator tools now are good things you should be doing as a junior, as well as looking at some of those search websites that John mentioned, like fastweb.com, which are search engines, so you could find scholarships. Those are all things you should be doing in your junior year.
Yeah, we just hope to give you, all of our families just a baseline, general understanding and then some, especially when you start to hopefully, fingers crossed, hit the road. Fingers crossed.
So I see this question here. Is this financial aid info sent to schools that one is thinking of applying to, or to schools someone has already applied to? So let me reiterate that The financial aid information is only sent to the schools that you list on the FAFSA. So if you want the information from the financial aid application to go to the school, you have to tell the FAFSA that by putting in the code of the school when you apply. So it will only get sent to those schools. Theoretically, you should be listing on the FAFSA the same schools that you're applying to so that they can get the information.
All right, so I see questions. These are kind of in line with one another. Does filing for financial aid happen at the same time as applying for college? And do students have to apply to the college before they send the FAFSA? The answer is yes. You will be applying to colleges and filing the FAFSA at the same time. You know, if you're filing the Common App and the FAFSA, it makes it simple to get to everyone at the same time. You know, you may want to, I would say there's no hard and fast rule. You may want to, go ahead, Doc.
Yeah, no, it's absolutely fine to file the FAFSA before you apply or after you apply, but they should come relatively close to each other. Schools generally pull down the information from the federal government and bring it into their database. It is helpful when we're doing that if you already exist in our database. But if you don't already exist in our database, what will happen is pulling down the FAFSA will create a record for you in our database. So you better make sure that the name and address and email address you use on your FAFSA is the same one with your application, or the data won't match. I don't think people realize how important the consistency of giving schools the same data is, because we get, you know, maybe an inquiry form, maybe you come to an open house, or you do different things. We get pieces of your information. If they don't match, then we create multiple records for you and it causes a problem.
Right. Great answer. Yeah, that's.
John has to live with that problem sometimes.
Yeah, I'm familiar with it. Okay, so next one, 2 questions. Is it already late since the FAFSA opened on October 1st and early decision is November 1st? The answer is no. And Seton Hall, we actually offer early action, which is non-binding. But again, we have the priority deadline to receive our FAFSAs of November 1st, because we want that information. We want to be able to provide you your financial aid package as early as possible in the process to make things easier for you.
And I would say, you know, if a November 1 is the deadline, then you should get on it pretty quickly. But, you know, if you do it within the next few days and list the school that you want it to get to, it will get there in time.
Mm-hmm. And then the next one of that 2-parter is, with twins, do we open one and will it prompt us to create 2 student IDs? So the answer is no, you will not be prompted to create 2 student IDs. And I believe you're referring to FSA IDs. I believe you're referring to the FAFSA in this question. You will need to, each student, each one of these twins will need to log on to the FAFSA on their own, create their own ID. There will be no prompt. It won't know offhand that there's a sibling that needs to file.
But the parent can use the same ID number for both twins.
Correct.
So John, this one's for you. What assets are not counted on the FAFSA? Retirement accounts, life insurance, 529 plans. Are they included in the FAFSA?
They are 529 plans, 401ks, IRAs. We had a question last night on another presentation of, let's say, you know, and since we just spoke about twins, there was a family that had triplets, wanted to know if only one, or not triplets, had three different children, wanted to know if only one student was applying and going to college, would he only need to submit information for that one 529, or would he need to put the sum total of all 3? The answer is the sum total of all 3, unfortunately. You know, life insurance policies, it depends. I'm going to say yes, in general, if there's been any distribution, one-time distribution and that affects your income for the year of the tax information that we're asking for, again, 2019, that is something that could potentially be addressed. I'm not sure. Did we mention special circumstance earlier, Dr. McLeod? Did I miss that?
We did not, no.
Okay, so I'll introduce that. Special circumstance, knowing that, of course, right now we're in unprecedented times. Special circumstance is a process by which, if the FAFSA, being that it's taking financial information from 2 years prior, if that does not accurately reflect your current family circumstances, special circumstance is a mechanism by which the federal government allows us, or I should say financial aid offices to receive additional information from you. So that would be more recent tax returns if you have them, or pay stubs, or anything regarding these circumstances. So this could be circumstances regarding a loss of income due to reduction in hours, or loss of employment, or say there could be an unexpected death or divorce in the family, or there could be unexpected medical expenses, medical or dental expenses. So if that has happened and that's affecting, you believe, your award eligibility, there is a process by which we could take additional information. The financial aid office would review that, update your FAFSA, and see if that would result in a reduction in the EFC. Again, that number, that expected family contribution. If so, that could potentially yield to an increase in award eligibility. The thing about that, though, we would caution, is that you could go through the process and potentially not receive any substantial increase in awards. Generally, to be eligible for, generally for increased eligibility, we go back to that slide earlier. We talked about Pell eligibility and having an EFC of roughly 5,500 to be eligible for, potentially a maximum of 6,000 for the year in Pell Grant. So EFC of 5,500, rough idea, again, was a family of 4 with 40,000 in income. So, a reduction from 6 figures to say 80,000 for a family of 4 might not yield any significant, a substantial increase, and it might not, just to caution what the results could potentially be. And I know Dr. McLeod probably wants to add to that.
Yeah, I just want to give you like a visual on that. So let's just say you're two parents in the household, and between the two of you, you earn, $200,000 a year, and you have a lot of savings, and so on and so forth, and you have an EFC. I'm just making this up. Let's say your EFC is like $40,000, and one parent loses their job, and now the income is only 120,000 instead of 200. That might reduce this process that John is saying, the special circumstances, or sometimes it's called professional judgment. That process, which you would ask the financial aid office to review, it serves only to reevaluate the EFC, the estimated family contribution. It might result in that EFC dropping from 40,000 to 25,000. But that might not be enough to qualify you for anything from the federal or the state government or the school. It may be, or it may not be. It really depends. But just because your financial circumstances have had a significant change, and it's very real for you, doesn't mean it put you at the bar or the threshold to qualify for anything else. So I just wanted to make that clear, because we do get that a lot. But if you do have significant changes, you should ask the school about a special circumstance. I see here a question: how many years of taxes are included on the FAFSA? Just one, just your, as John said, the 2019 year. John, I'm going to ask you this question. Can you repeat again how the 401k affects, given you can only withdraw from a 401k after a certain time?
So the FAFSA asks you to self-report asset information. So basically just the sum total of the 401k and any other investments, such as brokerage accounts, IRAs. You would just need to report the sum total in, it's only 1 or 2 fields that the FAFSA asked this question, and that is not information that gets pulled over or populated from the IRS data retrieval tool. So I believe that there might have been confusion, because I mentioned if there had been any one-time distribution from, say, a life insurance policy or a 401k, that would only affect the FAFSA if that was received in, say, we're looking at the tax year 2019, and that increased artificially someone's income for that year, and that would cause an inflation of the EFC. And so that's something we could reevaluate in line with, Dr. McLeod's explanation of the special circumstances.
So I see Janet Robinson asked a question, which I will answer. It says the EFC is always paid by the parent, ? So the net cost doesn't include that. In other words, in the chart the parent is responsible for the net cost plus the EFC. That's not correct, Janet. So the net cost, just to say it again, is the total cost minus all of the gift aid. Every school has a different philosophy of giving gift aid. Sometimes you can receive a merit scholarship that is greater than your need and covers all of your EFC. It depends on the school's philosophy and their awarding practices. So net cost is the cost of attendance, the sticker price, minus all the free money you're getting. That's the net cost. Sometimes part of the EFC is covered by that, sometimes it is not. Okay, what you are remembering is a different slide I showed you, which is cost of attendance minus EFC equals need. But it's not necessarily the case that a scholarship can't go beyond need. I see Ben is wrapping us up, saying that that's the last question we're going to take. So thank you, guys.
Yeah, I want to. So I want to just say one last kind of note. The reason why we have this, outside of the obvious, is we want to make sure that our students get all the proper information there. I think that John and Dr. McLeod too will agree. The less bottlenecks in this process we can have, and the quicker that our students can get to a more informed decision with everything in place, the better it is for all parties. So what we want is to make sure that you have, if you have an outcome that's a positive, you have the right forms in, you can get financially packaged, you can get everything in front of you, and then that gets you quicker to defining what you want to do and what a value is, for the student and for the family. So I want to say thank you to John and to Dr. McLeod. And we really appreciate you guys taking time and doing this. I mean, annually for years. I will send out the edited version of this. I'll make sure it's as succinct as possible, and also the slide deck. And
can I just make a quick plug, Ben?
Sure, of course.
Just so you know, we are hosting a few in-person tours and visits on campus, and we know that many of you might not have school on November 3rd, 5th, or 6th. So those are days we will have, we have tours every day, but we have expanded the opportunity for people to come for tours. So if you wanted to see campus in person, I welcome you to come then.
And so I'll provide that link along with some other links that I dropped in the chat a little earlier to Mr. Laster, so he can get that along with you with the slides.
Great, and thank you all for everyone coming, and hope everybody stay healthy, have a great night, and thanks so much.
Thank you. Take care.
Bye-bye.